Nerds for Yang.
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds! So nerds!
Now with this campaign, bang, dang, it's and Drew, come roll with the Yang Gang.
Hello, and the Yang Scream is in the. You and I were on this show. It feels like it was like a freaking decade ago. What have you been? So I mean, since we talked, when we last talked, that was really fun. That was one of the first times we had guests on the Nerds for Yang channel.
Cool.
Yeah, you were one of the early pioneers of what we do here now. So, but at that time you were a volunteer, of much more formal capacity, and I was kind of I would love to start there. Like, how did you go from enthusiastic volunteer? You were in Georgia, right?
Yes.
In Georgia,
where they decided that it's totally fine for us to not be in lockdown anymore now.
Yeah, kind of
about the last time that we spoke, because you said it was October, and I was remembering that it was National Yang Gang Day, and I was in downtown Atlanta, and we were organizing an event where we toured CNN Center. Actually, they did that while we were doing our interview, and then we walked around downtown Atlanta, like shouting, Andrew Yang, and Yang Blood Circle Up and all that stuff. And it was a blast. We had a lot of fun. Today I was trying to set it up to where I could get CNN in the background, because we were going to do that next.
Yeah.
And I got it all set up in the parking lot, and the security guard came up to me. He was like, can't do that. Like, oh, man. I'm like, it's going to help CNN. CNN's logo is going to be in the background.
There you go.
Anyway, so I was scrambling at the last minute. So anyway, that was good time for making that happen. That was really, really cool. And the person who led the April rally here in Atlanta had a lot to do with it. I planned to help plan a rally here in Atlanta. You disappeared and scared me.
I give you a little. Sometimes when I want to take a sip of tea, but since you were in the middle of a cool story, I said, I'll zoom in on Lacey.
You
a little bit more.
I messed it up here.
It's all good. So continue with your story. So you helped organize the event, and you got to know obviously the principal and some of the inner circle. And then did you guys just sort of like keep in touch since then? And like, how did that?
Yes.
Develop?
And essentially what I did on the road was the same thing that I did in April here in Atlanta, just on steroids, because we were doing like 3 or 4 events a day, especially at the end. So that experience really like laid the foundation for me to be able to, go on staff and work with them in the way that I did. So that was a big part of it. I built a good relationship with them then and kept in touch, like you said. And at some point about my life doing this anyway. Yeah. And I was like, I'm just going to send Zack. He was like, all right, well, let's set up a phone call. So the rest is history.
What was the interview process like? Was it pretty informal, or did you have to
I think it was probably less informal or less formal, since I knew them and they knew that I handled that rally from top to bottom.
That was probably the ultimate job interview.
That was it. It. And I didn't know that at the time that's what was happening, but that's totally it. So it's like, of course. And I mean, I had been doing events here in Atlanta. I think we did total like 45 events between February. Wow. So we were doing stuff every weekend. Hey, this is what we have going on. I mean, we did the free beer when you Google Andrew Yang at the Atlanta MLS game tailgates. I mean, those were so much fun. And they were so, people responded so well to them. And so I think there was an abundance of behavioral data that they had to judge on, of like, okay, is she going to be committed? Is she going to be passionate? Is she going to be dependable? And it was like, yeah, we've seen that. So yeah, I mean, there was definitely an interview, and there was definitely an interview process, but I'm sure it was less than maybe other people have just because they had that data already, you know?
And what was the job description like? Or was it just like, hey, just come over and we'll tell you, we'll figure it out?
And so that's someone who leads a team of folks who go in advance of the candidate and set up the space, make sure they know how the candidate is walking into the venue, how he's walking out, where's the candidate vehicle parking, is there a green room, is there snack set up, make sure you can get that taken care of if it's necessary. What does the media world look like? Where's the media going to set up? What does the crowd world look like? Where are they going to sit? Are there directional signs for where they need to go? So for a large part of it is event management. And then some of it is is logistics and, you know, handling some of Andrew's travel, Zach's travel, that kind of thing.
That sounds very stressful. How was it? Was it okay?
No. Okay. So it's a lot of work for sure.
Yeah.
And it was constant. But as far as being stressful, nah, dude, we had a blast on the road. We worked hard. And I also think like that's a niche of mine too. Like I really realized that planning the rally. I was like, I can do this pretty well, actually, you know? So yeah, I mean, I guess for certain personalities, certain people, that would be stressful. For me, it wasn't stressful. And we had the greatest team of people. I have never in my life worked with such quality people. I mean, the culture around what we had, the folks on the road, was very much like we have each other's backs. We're in this to do this. Whatever it is that we need to do, we're just going to get it done. Like nobody's going to get mad at each other if something fails. Like we're all there, so super collaborative, supportive. I mean, I told Zach this, but I've never felt so respected, so appreciated, so empowered to do my job. Like super autonomous, super respected. I mean, it was such a great experience for so many reasons, but that's one of them. And I think it's a testament to the culture that, you know, Andrew and Zach, you know, create and have the experience over time of building businesses and know how, you know, it's important to create that type of an atmosphere so your people can thrive, you know, and not be micromanagerial and all that. So yeah, it was such a great experience. I'm super happy to have had it.
So you were part of the team that was basically like always 1 or 2 days ahead of wherever Andrew was next, and kind of made sure like you were laying the groundwork so everything went smooth when he was ready to go. What was what talk a little bit more about the culture of the Yang organization. I mean, so many of us, we see him in podcasts and we watch him in sort of media interviews, but it's we don't really have a good sense of what he is like as a leader. I think a lot of us have some intuition or, you know, kind of have a feel for how we think he is, but you actually worked in an Andrew Yang led organization. What is it like?
Well, like I said, I mean, it's one of the best work experiences I've ever had, period. If not the best work experience I've had. You know, the team that I worked with, I had 2 folks that were like over me per se, supervisory roles. And then I spent a lot of time obviously on the road with Andrew and Zach. So if we kind of rotated the responsibilities to drive the candidate vehicle at times. So if someone was driving the candidate vehicle, then there was other people on the team who were on site ready to receive us and that kind of thing. So we spent different amounts of time doing different roles. But it wasn't ever like, oh, that's your job. Why didn't you do it? Or that's my job. I'm not going to do it. Or that's my job. I'm not going to help you do that. So there was a lot of support, and it's so funny because it's so opposite of what you would think for a political campaign. I mean, I know I have friends here in Atlanta, and they were like, "Lacey, are you sure you want to go work on a campaign? Like, you know how like shitty that can be?" I'm like, "Yeah, but this is not your typical candidate, you know." So yeah, I mean, Andrew has an excellent ability to make people feel valuable. Let them know that he knows that they're valuable. He sees them as valuable. Um, make them feel at ease. He's so genuine all the time, all the time. It doesn't matter who's around. He's super genuine, and that in itself is enough to help you feel empowered to be genuine as well and to be yourself. And so I think that is one of the things that, sticks out to me about the culture. And what's so beautiful about it is there's the balance. He does the balance of that, of professionalism, keeping boundaries that are professional so well in the midst of all that. And Zack too. I mean, Zack, one of the things I realized on the road is Andrew Yang is awesome, and there's no question about it. But people don't know how awesome Zack Grauman is. That guy is so brilliant, and he was so. It was like, for real, he was the yin to the yang. Like the exposure that I had, which was not constant, obviously, but it was some. I was like, oh damn, if we didn't have Zack, we needed the balance between the two of them. And that's exactly, that's what good leaders do. They find the people who will complement them, who will, help them along in the right ways. And so I was like, man, I don't know. I have a lot of respect for Zack, and just watching how he did his job, how important his role really was. I mean, equally, I would say, many people might not say, but I would say his role was equally as important as Andrew's.
What would you say? What were some specific things that you think Zack brought to the table that complemented what Andrew had, so that you had this 1 + 1 = 3 combination?
Mm-hmm. So I think Zack had an ability to think bigger when it came to thinking ahead about kind of the dynamics of what could happen if you did A, B, C, or D. And on a scale that was beyond the compassionate, loving, human loving person that we all know Andrew is. And so I think that's one of the things that I noticed about Zack, that he was really good about, okay, let's be able to take a look at this from multiple different angles and use that as a good way to gauge what's our best decision making. And I mean, I'm not saying Zack made all the decisions. That's not what I'm saying. And I don't even have enough data to know that, because I wasn't even around for that long. But what I am saying is that he did a great job of that particular thing right there, which is very important. I mean, what I also realize is, if you're going to run for any office, you're only as good as the people you have around you, because you can't do it on your own. It's just too much. It's just too much.
Yeah.
I think we have an example of that in the White House right now. Okay, that's enough.
Don't even activate me, man. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
We will touch on that later. But let's talk more about your. So can you give us a story about a decision that you think the campaign really struggled and kind of had to really think through, and it was a really hard call? Obviously the call to suspend was a big one, but I'm thinking maybe prior to that, so many of us were rooting from the sidelines and doing everything we could. It's rare to talk to someone who is kind of in the room where it all happens, right?
Yeah.
And I know that you're not in the room all the time, but you were closer than certainly I was. Just some dude on YouTube. So what were some things you observed or kind of participated in where you're like, wow, when we write the book on the Yang 2020 campaign, this was a very hard decision that we had to make that was very impactful, and maybe in hindsight this is what we learned from it?
So I would say that how to handle strategy in Iowa and New Hampshire and how to balance that is probably one of the ones that I would throw out there. We're an outsider campaign. We're trying to figure out kind of how to handle all that. And, I think with the information that we had at the time, we did the best we could. And there you go. I don't know that we had enough information to make a different decision at the time of what we did. So I don't know. Looking back, I don't know if I would have done anything any different. And I've said this to several people, like, I'm going to be the last person to throw stones because I don't want that responsibility. Like, who am I? You know what I'm saying? I don't know a lot about how this stuff works. I was brand new to politics. But I would say, yeah, like the balance of how do we balance our investment in Iowa, New Hampshire, early states, and time, money, et cetera, et cetera.
From the outside, it seems like we really went nearly all in on Iowa and New Hampshire. I guess you're saying an alternative approach would have been to kind of play a longer, like kind of spread the resources out to multiple states. Is that the debate, or?
That was the decision that was being made. Like, how are we going to address, and how much time does each place and money and priority does each place get? Not saying that, they're looking back, or I overheard conversations where they're looking back and saying, we wish we would have done A, B, C, or D. Not saying that, but that was definitely a very important and impactful decision that the campaign had to make about where we were going and how we were going to get there.
You know what's funny? I was looking at our October 2019 conversation. It's like going to a time machine. And, one of the things that we were worried about, I think all of us were like, wow, Yang's not doing as well with women. And I think the reality was, at least based on Iowa and New Hampshire, he just wasn't doing well enough with all groups. Were you surprised at the Iowa and New Hampshire outcomes, or did you sort of see from the inside that it was likely going to end up in that direction?
No, I certainly was surprised with Iowa's results. I mean, we were on the ground going so hard, 2 and 3 events a day, so much positive feedback from people. I mean, 90% of the feedback we got from people at events in Iowa were positive. They may not have walked out of there saying, I'm going to vote for him for president, but they almost always walked out of there with a more positive feeling towards him than they did when they came in, which is huge. Like, what every politician wants that, right? Like, that's not something that's easily accomplished. So let's hold on a second and just bravo for that, right? But based on what we saw with that, there was no reason for me to think that we were not going to do that well. I was shocked. Now, the other thing to remember about me in Iowa is that I was there for probably 7 to 10 days working our 17-day bus tour. And then I got sick. And I don't know if you know this, Tom. Did you know this?
No, I didn't know that.
Oh, wow. Okay. So and now I wonder if I had COVID, but I got really, really bad fever, bad cough, super, super low energy. It was bad. Like, Hightow drove me from one part of Iowa to another one so I could go to the doctor and be with where the team was, so I wasn't left in the town before. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it was really, really bad. But I had a very high fever. I took a flu test and it came back negative. And the lady, and I even asked her about coronavirus then, the doctor that I saw, and she's like, well, blah, 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 we don't know a whole lot about that. And blah, blah, blah. And, I know that no like judgment towards her. I know we just didn't know a whole lot about it then, but I do think there's a very good chance that I actually had it. I'm going to take an antibodies test actually here in the next couple of weeks, but it knocked me out. It knocked me out for a good week. And then I flew to New Hampshire and I really wasn't well fully. And I kept pushing. And I was like, I can't. And so then, the campaign started to slow down and I was one of the first ones to go home. And it made a lot of sense in a lot of ways, because what can I do? I was sick. You know what I mean? And so, and then
you had to go home before the New Hampshire primary.
Yeah, I was in New Hampshire. Yes, but I wasn't there the night that we suspended. That's correct.
So let's talk about Iowa. So you're organizing this huge bus tour. The energy on the ground sounds super positive and fired up. We know on the internet he's like Elvis. So it's all seeming like we're gonna have a huge upset, or at least come in maybe fourth or something like that, and maybe high single digits. What was that like when the results? I guess, well, it's not like the results started rolling in because of the stupid counting problems.
Right. That was frustrating.
What was it like kind of watching all this unfold?
Yeah, I mean, it was shocking. It was appalling to know that the systems that were supposed to be in place to make sure that this happened smoothly weren't. And I think none of us, I didn't expect that result at all. Like you're saying, all the evidence that we had, all the evidence that we could see was that, hey, we might freaking surprise people, you know? So such a tough blow. I mean, and as someone who had started out as a volunteer and a supporter, wow, it was so much harder for me, because I like to think of myself as a realist and realistic, you know. But I also know that when you're positive and you believe that things can happen, there's a lot higher chance that they can and they will. And so I was very positive all the way through. And I was like, from every indication I got from Andrew and the team, we weren't going anywhere for a long time, you know? And so when this happened, it was like, holy shit, like that's not what we planned. I mean, I described it to somebody like this. It's so funny. I said it felt like we were on a roller coaster. We were going to the very tip top of the highest hill on the roller coaster. And we're like, yes, we're about to go down the hill. It's going to be awesome. And so we went down the hill and we crashed at the bottom. You know, it's like, it's not even that we just went to the bottom and it just wasn't that cool. It was like we went and crashed in flames.
Yeah.
From an emotional standpoint, you could say that it felt like that.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly, I think a lot of us were really struck by that. And Heidi, thanks for the super chat. Heidi saying that it was a gut punch, and I think Heidi's going to have you on her show
cool.
in the future.
Hi, Heidi. Love you, girl. Yeah. She's awesome. I love her.
You're one of her favorites as well. Yeah. So after Iowa, were you thinking, okay, those Iowans, they're crazy, whatever. New Hampshire, more independent, a lot of libertarians, you know, we'll show them we'll show them why Iowa was a blip. Or was the vibe like, oh man, we're screwed? Okay,
so remember I was sick. So I was like, I quarantined myself because I didn't want the team sick. Yeah. So I don't have a whole lot of perspective on how the team was feeling at this point. However, how I was feeling was this, what you just said, like, oh, well, whatever, it's Iowa. It's not the end of the world.
Right.
It's state one. We have multiple more states to go. New Hampshire's much more, it's a different voting style, different voting process. And many of the people there are, think differently than the people in Iowa. So I thought, okay, plus we had a team that had been in New Hampshire for a while. They were awesome, Steve and Christina. And so in my head, I'm like, all right, let's get to New Hampshire and see what happens before we, throw in the towel or start to get too sad. I mean, again, little Miss Eternal Optimist over here. I was like, it's all good. We'll be all right.
So the thing with Iowa is, like you mentioned, you guys did a lot of events there, right?
Yes.
How many people showed up to each of these events? Would you get like dozens or hundreds or
hundreds?
Yeah.
And depending on the event, we would have up to 1,000 certain ones.
So here's the weird thing. Like, you guys probably had like 20, 30 events at least in Iowa. And if you say like, all right, well, let's say we have
no, more like 90, I think is what
wow.
I saw.
Yeah.
A lot, dude. A lot.
So, if you have like 1,000, we didn't have 1,000, but if you had like 100 people at each event, then that's 9,000 people if they were all unique and you didn't have duplicates. But presumably they had friends that they could influence. And then when you look at the actual, I'm gonna do a little quick chart sharing, some data. Got to do it.
We nerds now. Come on, I was waiting for it. Come on.
All right, here's the initial alignment, right, for the 2020 Iowa caucus, and not only, but 8,900 votes for Yang. So that suggests to me that there were probably people that went to the events that liked him, but at the end of the day decided to go with someone else. That would be my interpretation, that, like, of course we had all these events and of course people showed up and they were enthusiastic, but maybe they were just so focused on trying to find, maybe they didn't think he was like, credible enough, or, it would be too much of a long shot. They want to go with someone else. And, that's why you might get although Pete, they were willing to take a shot on Pete, 37,000 of them at least. What do you think? What do you think was the driver of that disconnect between the event support and then the caucus night support?
Well, the caucus itself is a very different voting process, which we all know. So, and we're not even really talking about that because we're talking about the initial alignment. So that's 8,000 folks. Yeah. So to answer your question, I would say that I think the disconnect is that people freaking love Yang. Like, I don't know anybody who doesn't really love Andrew Yang, right? And I think that they did. That as they saw him, they really liked him. But that didn't translate to, is this the guy that I think can be our president and needs to be our president? And I think the missing piece is just exposure, people knowing who he is for enough time. The fact that he hadn't had any experience in politics maybe was something that kept people from voting for him. I don't think it'll be something that will now, especially considering all the positive media that he's been getting and all the praise that he's gotten since spending. So I don't think that's going to be a hurdle again. And if we had to do 2024 right now, I think he could run and I think he could win without having that, that previous political experience being an issue. But I do think it was in this case.
So you raised a great point. If we had to run 2024 right now, I mean, we technically haven't picked a nominee yet for the Democratic Party. It is a very unusual time. And the candidate in the primaries with the most delegates, he's I think he's showing some weakness, whether it's justified or not. A lot of us dream of a day where, I think it was Herzog did an April Fool's thing where he said Yang unsuspended. And part of me believed it for a half second. And I was like, oh, this is so awesome. And I looked at the date and I was like, oh, mofo. But I mean, like, Yang's message around UBI seems so relevant now that we've just flushed $3 trillion down the toilet through these random government programs.
Yep.
And I'm sure they will have some benefit. I don't think it would have nearly the same benefit of the freedom dividend for everybody for 18 months would have had, which is what we could have done, even without a VAT, because apparently we can spend $3 trillion now with no VAT. So, all the rules are out the window. So do you think like, you're an optimist. Do you think there's any door, like a crack open for seeing Yang either on the ticket or at the top of the ticket, or do you think like, hey, let's just focus on winning in 2020 with the nominee, the likely nominee, and focusing on 2024 for the gang?
I know that it's Yang Gang's dream that Andrew would unsuspend, but I do not think that's even close to likely at all. I could be wrong, but I doubt that. Like, that would be the biggest shock to me if that happened. Now, would I love it if he did that and there was a path to victory and we could do it? But based on all the good that's happening now, of course I would. But I don't think that's happening. Do I hope that he would take, do I hope that he would be VP with Joe Biden? Of course I do. I just don't think that it's going to happen because I think he is set on a female.
Yeah.
I think he's set on a female. And it's sad. However, I do think that Joe Biden, there's a good chance that he would involve Andrew in his presidency. So that's a good thing.
Yep. I wouldn't be upset over that for sure. I do worry a little bit about whether we can beat Trump with Biden at the top of the ticket. Like, what's your? I mean, all of us. I think this is probably a self-selection bias here, but like, if you like Yang, it's not like, well, then obviously your next choice would be Joe Biden.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I've said this previously. I think obviously we're in a position where we don't get our first choice anymore. Like, this is not like the fun, woohoo, let's put the best guy that we like the most in office. But at the same time, like, I want a new president in 2020 and starting 2021. So I'm willing to vote for whom that person is, whoever the nominee is. Now, whether he can beat Donald Trump or not, I have no idea. I really don't.
It just occurred to me that we had you on the first time because we were talking about trying to get a woman's perspective on Yang and, why I think a lot of us felt like, wow, like Yang's policies would be very beneficial to women. I think you spoke really eloquently, and Jessica did as well, about that. How big of a deal for you is the Tara Reade stuff? What's your take on that?
Okay, so I got to be real with you. I have been a bit unplugged with political stuff since I've been home, just because it was so much of my life for so long. So I'm not the most up to date on all of this. Do you want to give me the high level?
I give you the TLDR. Sure. Yeah, I'll give you the high level.
Give me the high level.
So the high level is that there is an individual by the name of Tara Reade who worked in the Biden Senate sort of staff. I think she was a junior staffer or something in the 90s. And she was one of the 16 that previous employees who had said that, he had made them feel uncomfortable at times or, but never rose to the level of assault. But then she shared more information subsequently, I think a few months ago, saying that he did harass her and well, I would say this very quickly. Penetrated her with, pushed her against the wall and did inappropriate things, very inappropriate. What would be clearly assault if it were true?
Okay, and that was Joe Biden said that.
No, this Tara Reid said that Joe Biden did this.
Okay, got it.
So Biden's campaign has said no, has denied it unequivocally. And then a few days ago, Biden himself addressed it and said, this never happened, 100% denial.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting to me is, there was a time where I remember, I know this issue well because I was actually a big fan of Al Franken's. And I was actually hoping he might consider running for president, a couple of years ago when people were starting to talk about who to look at. And obviously he had to step down partially because of his own accusations that came out against him. And at that time, the Democratic Party was pretty clear, like, we need to set an example here. We can't have Kavanaugh kind of running around doing, getting all these accusations, and if it happens in our party, we need to set, kind of show a high bar.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of feel like there's been a political and perhaps practical calculation made, which is like, this is our nominee. We have to win this election. We can't, we can't really rake them over the coals over this unless there's like clear evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And part of me feels a little uncomfortable with that. It's like, whoa, like if another candidate, if somebody said, oh, he, assaulted me,
yeah,
I think we would probably be like, at least very animated about it. If Pence had been accused of something like this. And so on the other hand, a lot of people are going to say like, oh, her story's inconsistent, but it's 20 years ago. So I don't expect her to know every detail either.
Well, it's very common for trauma survivors, sexual abuse survivors to wait a long time to share their stories and not remember full details. So I would just preface with that. But I mean, I think the thing is like, I think I agree with you, Tom. I think it's a little ignorant to just go blindly with the guy and not listen to an allegation without considering it, not give it the consideration that it deserves. So hear it out, see what the details are of it. I think that's fair. I do think that people are so ready for a change from what is going on in the White House right now that they are willing to do that. And, I don't know that that's the best way to handle the situation. But you're right. I think that's kind of where all of our heads are at this point. It's like, all right, but we need a new president. And apparently this is the one that the people are choosing at this point. So yeah, but I support women. Obviously, I know that, sexual abuse and those types of things happen, and they happen way more than people realize. I mean, I think most women have dealt with something like that. So I support women, but that doesn't mean that I say that no matter what, if a woman says that she was raped, then she was. That I don't think is logical. I think there has to be a conversation about kind of like what happened and kind of working through that. So yeah, that's kind of where I land on all that.
Yeah, it's such a tough one because I agree with you. We cannot get to a place where anybody that says something happened immediately that the accusee's political careers ended. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, like it would be nice if we had some principles or some standard operating procedure, which is like, all right, well, this is what we expect. We expect that the candidate will personally deliver a clear explanation of his side of the story, that there'll be some sort of independent investigation or arbitration, or at least the media should cover it the same way, whether it's a Democratic or Republican or any kind of, libertarian candidate.
Right.
so hopefully, I don't think it's going to go away. So hopefully the Biden campaign, handles it appropriately. But so Lacey, you mentioned that you are kind of detaching or unplugging from politics for a little bit since you were so 24/7 on it.
Right.
So what are you focusing on now?
Time to shameless plug my podcast, right?
All right, go for it.
Well, other than getting through COVID, which is for real, like this is no joke. I've started a podcast called Rethinking Humanity. It's with a friend of mine named Sonia Laria, and she and I met a couple years ago in a philosophy meetup group. So we have had these conversations for a while now where we just are discussing things that just don't make sense about how our society is set up, that are not accommodating to us as human beings. And so there's a very similar value to our discussions or like ideology to our discussions to what Andrew, his platform, was written on. The reason I am passionate about all this stuff and the reason I became so passionate about Andrew's campaign is because I read an author named Eric Fromm several years ago, and he wrote similar things to the things that Andrew was saying was an issue. Back in the 50s, 40s, he wrote several books about, one of them was called The Sane Society. And he's arguing that just because everyone in the society has a neurosis doesn't mean that the society is sane, And that's the thing. It's like, okay, well, as long as you fit into the system, everything's fine. Well, actually, how about we take a look at what the numbers say about mental health, emotional health? What is it that causes humans to thrive? What do we need as human beings to achieve? I mean, you could call it achieving, what is it called whenever you get to the top of the triangle? I can't think of the word right now.
It's not self-actualization.
Yeah, that's it. Self-actualization.
Oh, okay.
Yes. I don't know why I couldn't think of it. Anyway, what do we need to achieve that? And what is it that we need as human beings to really not live a life where we're like drudging through, And one of the things he says is like, it's love. Love is one of the things that we need. We need community. We need relationships. But tell me how much time we typically have to invest in that, especially in the United States. And I mean, Tom, you may, have a little bit more insight in this too, because you've lived in other countries. I mean, my experience is living in other countries. There are other countries who value community, value time, value relationships, value family in a very different way than we do in the United States, because we're so materialistic and production and consumption, GDP economy driven.
Yeah.
These other countries aren't. And their quality of life is higher. They're happier people.
That is, it's such an interesting point. And, on the one hand, we're not the only ones that I think are perhaps over-indexed on material possessions and wealth accumulation. I think many parts of Asia have this problem as well. Like I lived for a couple years in Hong Kong, and that place is like capitalism on crack. It's so intense, right?
Right.
On the other hand, I visited a friend in Tokyo, and certainly like the city is super busy, but then when you go outside the city and you go to these like sort of Zen gardens and amazing national parks and just these little restaurants that are like in the forest on a hillside, it's a different pace, and the focus is less about like, if you go for dinner in Vegas, it's like, wow, this steak has like gold leaf and truffle this and all this, like just enormous amount of like kind of clearly over the top consumption. But you could tell there's just so much love and tenderness that was put into this tiny little dish. That's just a simple little like fish broth or something like that,
Yeah.
And then now here in Switzerland, although I'm moving back to the States this summer, but I've been here for a few years now.
Okay.
And it's definitely a place where the biggest thing I've noticed is how much everyone takes care of like the shared spaces.
Yeah.
So like the public transportation, it's as if when I first got here, I was like, oh, well, these buses and trains, like they must have just bought them last year. Because there's not a single Sharpie writing, all the seats aren't cut up, there's not a single touch of graffiti.
Yeah.
And I think that's just one of those things where like people pick up trash, they don't like other people's trash, they don't throw trash. And so like these little things definitely put a different focus. Another weird thing is like here they go, I think extreme. Like Sundays, there's almost no business open because Sunday is family time.
Okay.
And so, you're not supposed to be going shopping. You're not supposed to be going to Home Depot or Costco or whatever. You're supposed to be, hiking in the mountains with your family and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's a different perspective. And I worry a little bit like when you have these conversations, sometimes in the States, the perception is like, oh, well, you should love it or leave it, man. Like we're the greatest country in the whole world. And it's like, no, man, we are the greatest country in the whole world. We are an amazing country, but it doesn't mean we can't learn anything.
There you go.
From other countries. We can't always be right.
Hey, I said my dream job would be Andrew wins, and I would lead a team of people who go and live in different parts of the world, different countries, and like learn what do they do well, what works for them, and what could we bring back to the States and implement that would make our quality of life better, So yeah, like totally, we can learn. And is there great things about this country? Of course. I would argue that we are not the greatest country. I mean, it's easy to say that. I'm not anti-US. I love the United States of America. I'm thankful to have been born here. But there are definitely ways that we can improve the systems that we have in place right now. And there are plenty of countries that we can look to find examples and ways that we can do that. And, I've said this on the podcast, but it's like, what is the point of government? It's for us, like we're supposed to make it work for us. So why don't we do that? Like, it doesn't have to be the way it always has been. It doesn't have to be accommodating to things that don't empower us as human beings. I'll say this, that I lived in Guatemala several years ago and super enjoyed it. And one of my favorite things, I mean, the infrastructure in that country is very different than it is here. Obviously, they're not a wealthy country, but I can tell you that I had some of my happiest moments in my life living there because the people there just enjoy each other. They just enjoy being together. And it's not about how fancy is the house that they have that they're living in, or how nice is the soccer field that they're playing on. I mean, that was one of the coolest things that I got to do is we played pickup once a week, and I played pickup soccer with people from all over. The guy from Israel, guys from England, people from Guatemala, people from everywhere. There's a lot of expats there that go to learn Spanish. But we played on concrete, for God's sakes. I mean, that's not super safe, obviously.
Yeah.
The point is nobody cared, and we had a blast. Why? Because we were doing something that we enjoyed together. And, like the difference between like coffee in Latin America and coffee in the States, I think this is a very good illustration. Coffee in the States is where you go. It's where you go when you're on the way to hurry up and get to where you're going. You don't typically hang out in the coffee shop unless you're there to work, right? The coffee shop. In Latin America, you go to the coffee shop and you're there for 2 hours chatting with a friend. And rarely are there a bunch of people. I mean, the number of people that are in there in front of their computer or their phone is way different than the number of people who are doing that in the United States. So that's a picture that could illustrate what I'm talking about. And I think some adjustments could really, really help us. I mean, if you think about this, Tom, too, relationships. Mm-hmm. Relationships thrive when the persons who are in them know themselves. Okay. So let's say me and somebody else are in a relationship and I get upset about something, but I don't know exactly what it is that I'm upset about because I'm not as self-aware. Yeah. But I'm taking it out on him because I'm frustrated. And he goes, honey, what's wrong? And I go, I don't know. But there's no way you can bridge and get through that because I don't know myself well enough to even be able to communicate what's going on with me. So the point of me saying that is if we don't have time to know ourselves, to even listen to ourselves, to have the conversation with the person, we can't have quality relationships. And I would say that that's arguably one of the number one things that we need in life to feel satisfied and to have a quality of life. We need good relationships, but we don't prioritize them. Not that much, not in this country.
Yeah. I mean, I think you could argue that self-awareness and understanding who you are and how you tick and what makes you, what gives you joy, but what also frustrates you and why, and what gives you anxiety. Mm-hmm. I mean, those are not only important for, certainly to your point, very important for relationships, but they're also important for how you are as a productive member of society. True. Like if you're really unwell or kind of just unaware of your kind of internal self, you're probably less likely to volunteer, less likely to help other people. I'm sure there's a cascading kind of, list of things that happens. But that if anyone, so half of my family is very MAGA, like loves Trump. Yeah. And if they were listening to us now, I know exactly what they would say. Look at these snowflakes and their feelings. Oh, isn't that precious? Why don't you man up? And they would, they're like, this is America. Mm-hmm. This is the land of the strong. This is the land of the F-150. We don't have time for your kale, pies and your herbal teas,
Oh boy. Well,
I mean, you've probably encountered people who are like, America equals macho power, winning all the time. We're better than everyone else. USA, USA, USA.
Right. Precisely why I kind of gag a little bit when somebody says, like, America is the best country. I'm not saying we aren't a great country. We are. But that's kind of the attitude that some people give off when they say that. And the reality is like, we're human beings, we're animals, and we are multifaceted, and our mental and emotional health is a real thing, and it affects our physical and vice versa. And so you can't detach the two. Yes, I understand what you're saying because I live in Georgia, so I totally get it. I totally get it. And I think I talk about mental health and have talked about mental health with people in the state of Georgia. And later I think, I don't even know if they realize that, that mental health is like a real thing that's legit. Like it's important. It's valid. And a doctor who practices psychology is a doctor legit, So, and that's not just the state of Georgia, but you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah, I was talking to Blair Walsingham in Tennessee, and she's running for Congress, and she was talking a lot about the importance of mental health and you know, especially with kids these days. You know, either we're better at measuring it, or there's just more challenges with folks these days. And it's one of those things, like, on the one hand, I would totally agree that that as a country we need to get better here. On the other hand, I'm curious, like, what do you think government can do about this? Like, maybe there are some things that, obviously, medical care, health insurance, that would be a huge one. But do you think there's anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's multiple ideas here and things to explore. And that's something that Fromm talks about in To Have or To Be, which is the book that we're kind of like launching from in the podcast right now. But I think basic income is a beautiful start, because what it does is it gives the power to people to take some time for themselves. They're less worried about taking time off. They're less worried about staying in a job that they don't really like. Mothers can stay home and be empowered to stay home with their children, caretakers, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, adding it to healthcare and it being something that's guaranteed, mental health, we need to, that would be a huge improvement. We need to remove the stigma that goes along with that, because so many people are in a position where they could benefit from having some help in that area, but they won't do it because they think that means that there's something wrong with them. And in fact, like, the folks that decide that they're going to do that are the folks, like, they're going to see a great change, and there's so much potential for good things in their lives when they do that. But that's just scratching the surface. So that would be like your first level of things. And again, like, that's part of the reason why I became so passionate about Andrew Yang, because I could see the overlap between the two and how his solutions were so perfect for the problems that we're facing. I think only other thing I'd say on this would be community is big. And Andrew talks about this in his book. He quotes Bowling Alone. And that is a book that talks about and measures how much community has declined over the years in the United States. And so things like co-housing could give us opportunities to build community. I mean, we live a pretty independent and in some ways isolated life, especially those of us who are single, and maybe live far away from our families. So a co-housing type situation where, there's one big piece of land and there's multiple houses on it, and there's an intentional community that is built. That's a good solution. And that, I mean, I would be highly interested in doing something like that. I have said, hey, I'm going to be very intentional about making sure that I have community, and I have soccer and philosophy meetup group and the gym and this, that, and the other thing. So yeah, I think without an intentionality and having time, which I think is difficult for people who have kids and other commitments, it's really hard to just, I don't think community just appears out of nowhere. Yeah. It takes effort. I don't know if it's different there where you are in Switzerland.
I've noticed a lot more, obviously before the lockdown, a lot more community events where the little village that we live in will be doing something that is open to everybody, like almost like every other month. I see the signs like, oh, we're celebrating this, or there's a little concert here. And, I live in a place that's probably like this town is maybe 5,000 people. So it's pretty small. Okay. It's like in the farmland, but they definitely gather. The other interesting thing is, because it's a direct democracy, they vote every 3 months.
Okay.
And when they, and so when they vote, that's also another time where everybody catches up and they bring their kids, and it's almost like the equivalent of like after church, kind of thing.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, the direct democracy thing here is incredible. Like, I've seen their little briefing books that they all get, because some of the folks that work there are Swiss citizens, and they bring them into work. And I'm like, whoa, what's that? And they're like, oh, this is what we're voting on. and here's the pros, the cons, and the data behind each side, and we have to make this decision, and there's like something like 60% that participate every 3 months, and it's like, wow, it's crazy, like for 4 times a year to do it 60% participation rate. As Americans, like we always talk about the greatest democracy in the world, but our participation, I don't know, it's not, I think, and I don't blame the people who are sort of agnostic or disgruntled now because they're just so fed up with the results.
Yep.
But but it's definitely different. Well, let me get on to some audience questions, Lacey, because I know we're running at that hour mark, and I wanted to make sure so the first question from Landline is, do you think Yang would have done better if there were ranked choice voting? Like, was he a lot of people's second choice, do you think?
Potentially, yeah. I think maybe what was on their mind was beating Donald Trump and experience in politics, but they really liked him, so maybe he would have been their second choice. That's a good thought.
Yeah, he might have been a lot of people's second choice. Like, he seemed most likable among the whole cast, but maybe not the one that they thought would be best to go up against Trump. Yeah.
Right.
Let's see. Oh, why was it decided not to continue on to South Carolina? You had Jermaine Johnson and none other than Dave freaking Chappelle.
Wow.
So, why not just see? I mean, it's a different demographic than Iowa and New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Well, I had that thought too initially. I was like, but there's two more early states, I think the numbers obviously showed that there was no real clear path to victory. And I know you guys have heard this before. Thank you for the question, Trumper for Yang. But, I think out of respect for everybody who so passionately followed what they were doing, they were like, I can't in good conscience keep taking people's money knowing that we really don't actually have a shot, And if you look at what's happened now, like, oddly enough, as soon as he dropped out of the race, everybody loves him, right?
I know.
That's, we say that, I think, Yang Gang with like a little bit of bitterness in our hearts, but at the end of the day, it's actually, okay, that's the best thing that could have happened, right? So I think we're as much as we all are like sad that it didn't go the way we wanted it to, we're in a really good position right now. I think we're in a very good place, and how things have evolved afterwards. And I mean, look at Yang on CNN talking about Project 100, talking about Humanity Forward, talking about giving people money. All these people are starting to see the light. Things don't always turn out the way we want them to, but I believe that they always turn out in a way that will be beneficial to us if we can see that and believe it. And so I think that's where we're at right now.
Cool. Soldier One, who is a channel member, thank you for your support. She wants to know, or he or she they want to know how can people subscribe to you on YouTube? How can they stay connected with you?
Soldier One, thank you for the question. We do have Rethinking Humanity has a YouTube channel. We don't have any content up yet. We will be doing some live and some recorded. We'll have some video there soon. I don't even know how to tell you what the link would be. I'm still so new.
If it's a new channel, you probably don't have a nice little shortcut yet. But I'm guessing, did you guys have a Twitter account? Is there a Rethinking Humanity Twitter account, or is it best to follow you on Twitter? Or
yes. We're still, if we're gonna go that route, we're building that idea and that plan out. So, but if you Google if you go on YouTube and search Rethinking Humanity, you may be able to find the channel that way. I'm sorry, I'm not educated on this part.
No worries
on this.
The other thing that people can do is let's just make sure that they follow you on Twitter.
And
right.
The other thing you can do is the website that you can go to and then find your platform for podcast is anchor.fm/rethinking humanity. That's it. And there's little icons that you can, so if you listen through Google Podcasts, or if you listen through, Spotify or whatever, we're not on Apple Podcast yet. It takes a little bit longer. But we're getting there.
Yeah, here's the I think I found the Anchor page. This guy, right?
That's it.
Yeah. And I'll post that in the chat room as well for people to find.
Awesome.
All right.
Yeah.
Let me see. Let me move on to the next question.
Okay.
There's there's a lot of commentary in the chat right now,
Is
which
there?
is
Okay, I might
great.
have to click there and see.
I'm scrolling down though. Give me a second.
Cool.
There's a lot of action.
So we have a lot of people watching.
Yeah, there's probably 100 concurrents.
Wow!
Oh,
come on! Thank you guys so much.
Oh yeah, people love you, Lacey.
Oh, I love y'all too, man. That's awesome.
So, what about work? Like, so the question here is about 2024 campaign.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm kind of curious, like, what are you going to do now? And would you be open to 2024, as Kyoto is asking? Sure.
So now I am obviously dealing with COVID stuff as far as the lockdown. I have a position that is set up for work once this all clears out with an audiovisual company here in Atlanta as a project manager. So like an event lead, basically, as the liaison between, whoever the client is and our team. So that's going to be fun. It's very similar to what I was doing on the campaign trail. And that's one of the things I learned from this experience, is how much I enjoy working events. So that's what I'll be doing once we start having events again. Previous to this, I was actually a full-time nanny for a family here in the Atlanta area with some land, and, they had a nice home. And so I was like, managing their home and, and being a nanny for their kids. And that was cool. Previously, I've been a teacher. So yeah, I've done several different things in my lifetime. I like having variety, and I think it's part of growing, I think it's part of life and growth. But so 2024, if they ask, I can't say like yes or no right now, because I have no idea where I'm going to be in 2023 or what have you, but there's no way in hell I wouldn't consider it. I love those guys. Like, there's nobody else on the face of the planet that I would work in politics for, at least not right now. I don't think like running for president and working in politics is not something I ever thought I would be a part of. But that guy's worth it. And Zack, and the quality of these folks. Evelyn, I'll tell you this. You think Andrew's awesome. Evelyn Yang is awesome. She is. I told Tyrene this. I'm like, I would almost, like, this close to saying that I like Evelyn more than I like Andrew. But that's like you cannot do that, because that's not okay. What's wrong with you? But no, she is an awesome woman. She really, really, really is. Yeah, I only talked to her a couple times, but she strikes me as a really genuine, positive soul, and very caring. And I also appreciate, like, totally no ego that I could detect, which is in today's world is kind of rare. So it's great. Hopefully we'll be. She would have been such a great first lady. Oh yes, you can say that again. All right. Let me ask you this. I've got a couple more audience questions. Who was your second choice when Yang suspended? Who were you thinking, okay, well, if not Yang, then? There was not one. I really didn't. I mean, I guess that's how invested I was in his, campaign and believed in his platform. I can't think of anybody that I'm like, yeah, I kind of liked that person otherwise. Not really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Slim pickings.
Yeah.
What is your favorite Andrew Yang story? Great question.
Is he all right? Drew, Jilly, can you clarify in the comments? What do you mean by Andrew Yang story? Are you talking about an Andrew Yang story interaction I've had with him, or what do you mean? I hope we have time to hear his response.
We'll see, but I'm going to guess it's probably like, hey, you worked on the campaign. Either you had an interaction with him or you heard about him having an interaction with other people where you're like, man, that dude is special.
Okay. I have a funny one and then I have another funny one, but also so the first funny one is after the Liberty and Justice dinner speech. Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
He killed that. That was one of his best speeches ever. But anyways, I was driving them after that. Andrew got the car and we're like, dude, you killed it, whatever. And so then he was like looking at his phone and he was like, wow. He's like, I have all these people that I've known, for many years, like texting me saying, you did such a great job. And he goes, what the heck are they doing watching C-SPAN? Like, why would they be doing that? And it was just so real, so genuine. The other one is so this is funny. And I am being vulnerable and telling you this because I would like everybody to think that, I didn't make any mistakes driving whenever I was driving with the team, but this is like probably the only one. But anyway, we were in California and we were in a parking garage. I hate parking garages. I hate them. But Julian was there on the ground, kind of like showing us which way we're supposed to go. And I had not been to the site previous. Typically, when you're doing advanced work, even if you're bringing the person in, you go and you see it previous. But we just had so much going on. I didn't know exactly. So anyway, so I come into the garage. It's an underground garage. And Julian's there waving. And I'm like, okay, cool. But I didn't know which way I was supposed to go to actually park. I couldn't tell. I knew the door was there, but I didn't know where I was supposed to park. So like I kept on going. And Ethan was like, Lacey, we don't need to go out. We need to stay in. And I'm like, oh, shit. So I put it in reverse.
Uh-oh.
And I totally backed into, like some structure, like the wall or whatever it was. And I was like, I am so sorry. And Andrew, I was like, I'm so sorry. I was like, I thought I was a good driver. And Andrew's like, don't worry about it. He's like, it's a rental. And he was like, you are a good driver. Thank you. And I actually am a pretty damn good driver. I just had a day. We all have our days, right? Come on.
Absolutely. Yeah. Even the best software doesn't always work. Yeah.
That's right.
That's great that he didn't sort of chew your head off, because
and that's
I think a lot of politicians, they have a reputation for like throwing stuff at staff and stuff like that, but it doesn't sound like he was that type.
Right. Yeah, no, that didn't happen. That's not an environment I want to hang out in, the one where I'm getting shit thrown at me. No thanks. But that's what I'm talking about how such a supportive environment and culture, around. It wasn't like, you're terrible, I can't believe you did that. It was like, don't worry about it. It's not that big of a deal. It's on the scale of what's important, not that big of a deal. Right. So
yeah,
very good perspective on that. He had, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's like those glimpses that you get, you kind of get a short moment into who they are, right? Like they say, like when you interview people, sometimes the interaction between that candidate and like the receptionist or the waiter at the restaurant says more about them than whatever they sell you or whatever the resume says, in terms of like how they treat people. And it sounds like you had a lot of, I mean, if you were you were in the advanced team and you're often in the car with them. If he were kind of like a BS artist or not genuine, you would have noticed it by now. And it sounds like he lived up to expectations.
No, for sure. And I promise you, like, I wouldn't have hung out very long if that was going to happen. Like, if he wasn't as genuine, just because I value my life and my time, you know, and I don't want to put myself through that, but also, like, it would have been such a disappointment to get to be as invested and excited and that I was, supportive that I was, and then get there and him not be this genuine guy that we all could see that he was. That would have been tough. And that's not who he is. Like, he is the most human being I have ever spent time with. Like, that is a very good way to describe him. He's so real. It's insane. And it's so refreshing, but it's also like, it's not common. It's very, very uncommon. And as intelligent and brilliant as he is, I think one of his strengths is he is so good at empathizing with people. Like, even folks that you're like, but yeah, you could totally be mad at that guy. He's like, yeah, but I get it. He's a human being, you know, whatever. Nobody's perfect. You're like, okay, that's all, you know?
Good for him, man. We could have had Yang.
Could have had
Freaking Iowa.
I remember when South Carolina happened, I'm like, we could have had Yang.
I know.
We could have had Yang, but things are gonna work.
You know, especially now, like you don't see Mayor Pete or you know, Harris or any of these people really being thought leaders in this kind of very difficult time. But you see Andrew like really rolling up his sleeves and trying to be part of the solution, which in my opinion, like, is the difference between a candidate that like looks good on paper, can give a good speech, but like we're now like you now get to see them after the Klieg lights are off and they're not running for anything this year. And you know, they're different, right? They're having different impact. They're having different, they're exhibiting different characteristics. So hopefully we'll see more of Andrew in the Biden administration.
Yes.
Or at the top of the ticket in 2024, or both. Yes. I'd be fine with both.
Me too.
But Lacey, I want to thank you for coming back on. I was telling my wife that I was looking forward to this show because, like, the folks who were on Nerds for Yang in the early days, like yourself, I feel like we've all bonded through this crazy roller coaster ride. And admittedly, my feeling was we also crashed into the bottom after New Hampshire. And I was totally blindsided by that. I was like, what? I thought we were going to go all the way no matter what kind of thing. Right. So, you know, thank you for everything you did for the campaign. I mean, you literally helped move the campaign forward.
Thank you.
And I'm so happy to hear that you have something lined up and that you're also healthier. I would not be shocked if you had COVID-19 at that time. Yeah. So I'm glad you made it. And let's get you back on the show, you know, in a few months when we can talk about some of your favorite podcast episodes. And for those of you who want to hear more from Lacey, don't forget the Rethinking Humanity podcast. It's available on Anchor, and you can look for it wherever you find podcasts. If it's iOS, just wait a little bit. It'll be there soon.
Yep.
And then follow Lacey on Twitter. And for everyone else, I'm just going to say goodbye, nerds.
Thank you, guys. Goodbye, nerds. Y'all are the best. Stay nerdy. Stay nerdy.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay.